Hey folks, welcome to the next edition of What's Next Beyond Service. This is episode 27 and it's entitled World Traveler. Now you'll see why here in a bit. So who we have with us today is Scott Forbes. Scott spent almost 25 years in the Army, so 24 years and 9 months, I believe. He was an aviator. He flew U-860s, which is the Black Hawk. You know, a lot of folks understand when you say Black Hawk, you probably don't know what a U-860 is, but they have an idea of what a Black Hawk helicopter does. Pardon me, who uses it in the multiple roles that platform and the pilots perform. So in addition to that, you know, as a pilot and you go through your time in service, you do other things too, other than, you know, sit there with the stick flying an aircraft. You move into other, other sections or other career paths. So Scott, in addition to being a pilot, was a maintenance and logistics guy. So he was responsible for, maintenance on aircraft, the technical aspects of that, and also a logistician for aviation ground support for the platform and, obviously, for the Army program. He was also a program manager, a test pilot, EMS pilot, and I guess earlier in his career, he was an intelligence analyst, which is pretty cool. So Scott is an intellect. He is a data guy. He's got a wealth of a background. And if you go to LinkedIn and check him out, you'll see what I'm talking about. He's got 29 certificates, and I'm not going to go through the whole list of those because the fact that there are 29. But of those, two that I thought were pretty cool. One is he is a first-degree black belt in Taekwondo, which I thought is super cool. And the other is he got his UAS, small drone license from the FAA, which, there's some cool stuff that you can do with that. If he decides he wants to get into that, he's got that already set up and ready to go. One thing I do want to also not forget to mention is that Scott was a Chief Warrant Officer 5 in the Army. So when you hear 5, that implies there are 5 ranks as Chief Warrant Officers, and that's the top rank. And not a lot of folks get to CWO 5. It's kind of rare air when you look at ranks. And warrant officers, chief warrant officers in particular, are the technical experts and tactical experts in their field. So you look to them for exactly that, what they bring with their technical proficiency. That adds another layer of incredible support and leadership in the military. The Marine Corps, the Navy, we all have our warrant officer ranks, and it's an integral part of how we do business, and that's what makes us so successful as the organizations that we are in the military. So I didn't want to forget to mention that. Okay, so in addition to all this, cool military stuff, Scott transitioned successfully. That's one of the reasons why he's here today. I absolutely want to dig into how he went about it, and learn from him, so that you folks that are listening that will be transitioning will have a few more arrows in your quiver when it comes to deciding, the smart way to transition. And I think it was absolutely, that way with Scott. He wound up getting an internship through a fellowship through Hire Our Heroes, and wound up working with Verizon and had a great time there. And that turned into a full-time position. That's where Scott is now. He is a senior engineer at Verizon. So that's the role that he is currently in. So Scott, I don't know whether you can still hear me. It looks like your video has frozen. Are you still with us? Sarah, are you still there?
Oh, yes, I'm here. I thought I saw a blink, but I was wrong. Yeah, I think he's frozen.
I think he got overwhelmed with his introduction.
He looks very stoic, though.
Yeah, well, I guess at that level, you have to be, right? Hey, there's as an Army guy, anyhow, right?
Understood.
Yeah, well, yeah. Now, what he did share with me before we kicked this off is, um, he's not home. He's up in New Jersey, so he's not home where he's got good connection. He's actually in a coffee shop in, the southern part of New Jersey. He's up there on family issues, so it could be that that's what the problem is. He was saying connection isn't necessarily the best, so it looks like we'll get back to him once he comes on here. But the thing that I also wanted to talk about, education wise, Scott went to Stockton University in New Jersey, and he also studied abroad at University of Edinburgh, which is a cool place. It's in Scotland. My daughter and I went there back in 2019 when she graduated from high school. That was the thing, that was her graduation present, kind of a big present, but she always wanted to go to Ireland and Scotland. That's part of our heritage, lineage, I guess maybe is the other word to use. But so we went there. It was beautiful. The people in Ireland are incredible. I don't think there's a mad person in Ireland. Everybody has a smile, and they're just good folks. So Scott, are you back up?
No, we have Chris Gregorio on now.
Hey, Chris, what's up, man?
What's up, brother? How are you?
Yeah, good. Yeah, we're having some technical issues here with Scott. I was just explaining he's not home and he's on the road and he's in a coffee shop, Starbucks. So they're not giving him good service, I guess.
Damn it, Starbucks.
Yeah. Or he is on family business up in New Jersey, and that could also be what it is too. I mean, he may have had to take a call, which it's absolutely understandable. So, but
oh, here he is. He's coming on now.
I am so sorry about that.
Hey, Chris. Chris is on my screen here, Scott.
Yeah. You tell everyone you're a technical expert, and then life throws a widget at you, right?
Well, hey, you were able to adapt and overcome because you're back.
Yes.
So that says a lot about your technical prowess here, right?
I guess so. Yeah, we've all learned how to deal with this over the past few years.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, there
Quite
you go.
sorry about that. Yep. And hopefully we're on my good camera. I have two, but I don't know if this is still my high def one or not.
Yeah, you're looking good.
Right.
Blue's my favorite color too. So hey, there you go.
Mine as well, Scott.
Well, cool. Well, yeah, Scott, blue. What do you think about that? Yeah, I've got blue lights in the background here. Now, hey, so while you were getting back on, I was just sharing your education as well. That you're a Stockton grad, University of Stockton, and you studied abroad in the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, which I think is super cool. You and I already talked about my time over there with my daughter, in Scotland, Ireland, and Northern England, which I would do again in a heartbeat. There's just so much to see. Even though we were there for a while, we, weren't able to see everything, of course. But so that's another trip at another time. So, and then the last thing, education-wise, Scott has a certificate from Syracuse with project management through Onward to Opportunity, via that platform or that vehicle, to get a PM. So, he's very educated. His wealth of experience in his profession as a pilot, and then also in the maintenance and logistics field. There's absolutely no doubt or wonder in my mind how Scott got hired right away with Verizon. And all of this didn't happen, he just didn't wake up or fall out of bed and, he's got this nice job at Verizon, right? It takes a lot of thought. It takes a lot of time. It takes talking to folks, networking. There's so much into a successful transition, and we're going to talk about that today. So with all of the discussion or the talk about Scott, let's introduce Scott real quick. Scott Forbes, welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much, Scott. Nice to meet you.
Absolutely. Nice to meet you too. Yeah, Scott and I have been connected for a while, and we actually tried to do this, months back. And when Scott was leaving service, he had secured his job with Verizon, moving down to Florida and having his home built. And then, of course, as we all absolutely know, our economy has been impacted in a large way because of COVID. There's all these second and third order effects with, when things shut down, then you start having logistics, supply chain issues, and shortages of equipment and product, and prices escalate. There's just so much to navigate through things like that. And so it kind of put some additional time on his home being done. And, there's this, life going on. So very thankful that Scott's able to join us today, and we're going to hop right into this. So what I'd like to do now, Scott, is give you the opportunity to talk to your military experience, share with us, exciting stories, stories of achievement, whatever it is that you want to talk to about your career. Let's do that, and then we'll transition to your military transition. So,
Okay.
What do you got for us?
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, you took all my highlights, Scott, so I don't have a whole lot left. But yeah, it's interesting. I joined, like you pointed out, I joined the military after finishing my degree in economics at Stockton University. There was a gap of probably about a year and a half, 2 years, where I had not yet completed my black belt. So I stayed in the area. I finished my black belt, which was, I think, pivotal to who I am as a person. It really was a providential discovery martial arts for me, and it provided me a focus and an outlet, and instilled discipline in myself. Got to study abroad at Stockton as well, which was wonderful. It made me want to travel the world, and was one of the reasons I joined the military, was to be able to see the world. So once I'd finished that black belt, I was trying to get a job as an analyst at first for the CIA. That was the other method of going overseas I was looking at. And they wanted either someone who had military experience or a master's degree, and I didn't want to take on more student debt. I had a lot already.
Sure.
So I went to the Army recruiters and I said, listen, I'll join tomorrow if you give me this job, intelligence analyst. And my plan originally was to do that for 4 years, get out, and then go back to the CIA and interview again, saying, hey, I've got my clearance now. I've got this experience. I'd like to try again. But after becoming an analyst and joining the Army, I found out about Warrant Officer Flight School program, which was, at that time, some of us are old enough to remember the internet wasn't very prevalent. It was not a whole lot of information out there. So trying to find the information to do this all and navigate the process was much more difficult than it is today. That's why I tell a lot of people, all the information you need to do this is out there. You just have to own it. But I found out about this program, and flying had been my lifelong dream. I had just given it up. It seemed totally insurmountable to me. My parents, neither one of them had graduated from college. My dad didn't even finish high school. I was the first one to go to university. That was a big deal. First one to leave the area for my direct family. So it was really like, coming up on these issues, there wasn't anyone who could give me counsel. So when I found out there was a program like this in the Army, it was my executive officer that told me. I was just truly dreaming again. And I was like, this is great. And I don't know if I shared this with you before, Scott, but I was reading a book that night, and that chapter of that book started with a quote. And the quote was, many people go through life with a dream which could have become a reality. A dream is a hint from God. And I didn't read past there. I just closed the book. And
Amen.
I said a prayer, and I just kind of went for it. And I got deployed shortly thereafter for, it was called, what was it? It was, I want to say Operation Desert Thunder is what we deployed as. It was one of the times Saddam Hussein had kicked out the inspectors from Iraq. So we went in a show of force. Literally, I finished my packet that night. We deployed at 2:00 in the morning, like right before I got on the bus. Lots of hurdles to jump through. I handed it off to our S1. I said, I'm putting this in your hands. Please get it submitted. And
Oh, wow.
It worked out. By the time I got back, I'd been picked up for Warrant Officer School after 3 years doing the intel thing. Got to have a deployment as intel, which I thought was really wonderful. And I also was in a unit that was the Army's liaisons to the Joint Forces Air Component Commander. So at that time already, even being an analyst, I was touching upon aviation. So it helped me a lot in my progression. And it's been a steady theme, even up till now, which is ironic. Did that, came in, became a warrant officer, got to go to Germany which was one of the reasons I wanted to join the Army.
Yeah,
Straight out of flight school.
That's the episode title, World Traveler. So
Yes, yes. And I have, I had backpacked Europe when I was in university, but I had no money then. So it was a totally different experience than when I went to Europe again, actually with some money in my wallet, and I didn't have to survive on like bread and cheese every day, which was my backpacking experience. Yeah. And sleeping on trains wasn't too much fun.
Yeah,
but,
it's a very different Europe when you can, do a little more than that, right? It's still beautiful either way, right? But you have more options.
Yeah, people are nicer to you when you've got a little bit of money in your wallet, so that's always fun too.
Yeah, imagine that.
Yeah, it's ironic, especially I won't even mention which cities were nicer. You could probably figure it out, if you've been to around the world. But yes, so I went over there, got placed in Germany, said I'll do whatever I have to do to stay here for as long as possible. And I was in a medevac unit. So another backstory, and it's a certificate that you won't see on my LinkedIn because it was so long ago, is I was a volunteer EMT in college. So I had been doing this life-saving mission because I was just passionate about helping people and helping to save lives. And then I get in a medevac unit, I'm flying helicopters, I'm saving lives. I'd fallen right where I wanted to be, and I was in Europe. So everything came together at that point in my life.
Right.
Unfortunately, shortly after being there, 9/11 happened. It changed, the next 2 decades for all of us that were in the military, all of us that hung out during that time period. But I got to, because of that, we wanted to keep continuity of expertise in Europe. So I got to stay in Germany for 12 years, which is pretty miraculous. But a lot of it had to do with, I learned that if you volunteer to deploy, you can stay there. So I just would raise my hand, like, send me back if I can stay another couple of years, and it was really good. Went to Iraq for our initial invasion into Iraq. That was in 2003, and then Afghanistan in 2006 and 2010. 2010 is when I got to work with your Marines. It was a great deployment for me, supporting the Marines. Very eye-opening, very professional, great LZ security, everything about that deployment. Having, that being my third one at the time was, man, we were doing so many things wrong, we could learn so many lessons from the Marines about how we could do this better. I don't think there's enough cross communication with the services to really leverage that expertise in the right way.
No, hey, you're so right. I know I'm interrupting you, but you're absolutely right about that. And it goes both ways, right? Certainly, there are so many things that we learn from our, brother and sister services. When you think you got it all going on, and then you see, oh, wow, they're doing it different, and it's probably a little better, so then hopefully you take some of that back with you, right? And then you communicate with folks and, look to make changes where you can, right? But you're so right.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great. Continuing on in my service, my pinnacle assignment was at Joint Base Lewis McChord. I did Germany, did Fort Belvoir, flying some VIPs out of the Pentagon for a while. And then I had the opportunity to go to South Korea. So I did 4 years in South Korea, again, to go overseas. It was, there was definitely some selfish motives for me. And from there, I finished Joint Base Lewis McChord. That job was my pinnacle assignment. So I was a brigade aviation maintenance officer. We call them BAMOs in the Army. And I managed a fleet of 127 aircraft at 3 separate locations.
Wow.
Alaska and two locations in Washington State. And then we would deploy all through the Pacific. So that was a logistical challenge always, trying to get around all these different customs agreements. And
absolutely.
So enlightening, very busy, very rewarding at the same time. I think those busy jobs is where you learn the most in the military, at least, although it's at a cost, right? It takes you away from maybe family time a lot. So that can be, it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, and then as a result, traveled to 48 countries, which was wonderful. Had a great career, met a bunch of wonderful people, and got to save a lot of lives. So I feel really good about my military service when I look back upon it. The opportunities the military gave me have been amazing. I always tell everyone who's in the service, you take this as far as you want to go, but you can make yourself into whatever you want to if you have enough perseverance and dedication to it to get there. The path is out there. You just have to follow it.
Amen. And you're so grounded, pun intended, as an aviator.
Good point.
No, you really are, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on is because of your path, and the more I find out about you, the more thankful I am as a U.S. citizen. I mean, I serve too, but it's so ingratiating, it's so heartening to know that there are men and women like you who, for whatever reason, decided that they wanted to serve in the military. They raised their right hand and they stepped in, and then they fell in love with service. And sometimes you don't necessarily go in thinking that, most do, but once you get in and you start to see what is out there and who you can become, and all those things come together, and you wind up saying, you know what, I think I'm going to continue, I'm going to stay. And during a course of 25 years, you probably had times where you were thinking, well, if I left now, what would it be like? What would that? And so I think that's not, I think it's a very logical thing. I think most folks think that. There are some folks that go in and, you got to pull them out. They're never going to want to leave. And that's good too. I mean, you need those guys and gals as well. But yeah, I'm just, thankful for your service, Scott.
Thank you.
Have done a tremendous job, and your capacity as a pilot, and then ensuring that those platforms were maintained, that certifications were happening when they needed to, that you were able to travel to other parts of the world. I love traveling, and being able to do that in the military. I remember you and I always talk to folks before they come on for the interview. So when Scott and I were talking, we talked about the world traveler thing and about being in the military overseas, stationed at a location where it's like Scott said, it's in front of you. You decide, how you're going to do it, right?
Yes.
There are folks that are overseas and they sit in the barracks, or they sit in their, BOQ, or they don't leave the base, and then they complain about being overseas, and okay, that's one way to do it, right? But when you take a look at where you are, and especially if you love history, I mean, there's no reason not to get outside the base. Now, certainly it depends on where you are safety wise, and you think through all that, but visiting other parts of the world, the culture there, the food, the people, and come on, you got to get out and do that. And that's, one of the things that I find fascinating about Scott. And we'll probably talk about this maybe towards the end of the interview on LinkedIn on Wednesdays. Scott will post a picture, and generally it's, him, or, if his family was with him on that time where he was traveling, you see a cool picture of them having a great time someplace in the world. And your duty as someone who's following Scott is to let him know where you think that is. Some are easy. Others are like, okay, I'm pretty good at traveling, and I don't know where that place is. So anyhow, so hopefully we'll talk a bit about that. But so yeah, Scott, in terms of your transition, so let's go ahead and talk to that now. We're about we're like 26 minutes into the interview here. So let's shift gears and talk about how you transitioned. Now, there's a lot of ways to transition, and as we talked on the phone, there's the obvious checklist that anyone can, pull that off, look at it, figure out how to do that, right? There's a timeline involved with things that you have to do when you leave. Folks that are really into transition say that, you should really start your transition planning 2 years out. Now, I agree. I mean, personally, but sometimes you don't know that you'll be leaving, and so you don't have 2 years. But at a very minimum, a year out is probably the least amount of time that you want to have under your belt when it comes to transition, leaving the military. So again, there are multiple ways to do this over the years. I got out, I retired from the Marine Corps in 2012. And there were a few programs nowhere's near the level of programs and the different types of programs that there are now. There are, literally thousands of nonprofits that are aligned to helping veterans, not just in transition, but other, aspects of being a veteran, right? So there's a lot of goodness out there. And so when we transition, we want to be focused on a number of things. If you're maybe single and you don't have family considerations, maybe you have a little more flexibility in what you do when you leave. But if you have a home, if you have, a lot of bills and things that are going to require, an immediate career that's going to, pay the bills, then, maybe you have a different thought process or a different way you go about transitioning. So you were very fortunate. Obviously, again, you didn't roll out of bed and fall into what you did. You spent time surveying, studying, and then you chose a path. And ultimately, you went with the Hire Heroes internship fellowship. But let's talk about your transition. What were some of the things that you considered as you were looking at the landscape? What were some of the other programs maybe you looked at? Give us the good, the bad, and the ugly of your transition story.
Sure. So yeah, I totally agree with you on the time frame. 2 years is I would say the optimal timeline for planning this. I did not do that right. I failed. I gave myself about a year. So I had to, and it was much due to the fact that I had PCS'd, and I always felt you got to come in strong to your new job and do your best at it. First impressions matter and last impressions matter, so it's ironically,
Right.
that's what I ended up having, just my first and last impression, because of only doing 2 years there. But I didn't give myself 2 years. So it was a little bit more accelerated and compressed once I hit into that transition journey. And it changed midway through my transition, everything changed. So there were challenges associated with that, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. But in the beginning, the military has its SFL TAP process. So you do that. It's a checklist that you have to get through. They won't let you get out unless you do it, but it's very much a fire hose. So you get it, but it's like a bunch of our other training, they're giving you everything they can possibly give you in a few days. And you're just you leave almost spinning, like, okay, where do I go with all this stuff? Now, there are so many organizations that are out there dedicated to help veterans that then you start to kind of peel that onion back, but it's confusing because there are so many. You really don't know which are the best ones, which ones to focus on. So I got lucky because I found the USO Pathfinder program, which helps you navigate that process, helps you find out different education resources. And they also, the best thing that it did for me is it introduced me to Michael Quinn. So if you've been on LinkedIn, you probably have seen Michael Quinn. And
That's right.
He is, he's a LinkedIn, top guy out there. And I did his LinkedIn classes. I still every once in a while will do one of his LinkedIn classes just to give myself a refresher. There are others who give great LinkedIn classes as well, so I do them as well. But that was the beginning of the success for me, I would say, because that started making me think about my brand, who I am, like as a person, how do I market myself. I had a LinkedIn for years. I'd never looked at it hardly at all until I hit my transition journey, which is probably true for many of us, I think. And some people don't
You're
even
exactly right.
Yeah. Some people don't create it until, they hit transition, even though you might tell them jumping up and down on tables, say you need to get this going. So I got very smart on LinkedIn. Ironically, I've given a few classes at Verizon on it because of that. My boss recognizes that I'm pretty good. And that helped continue my journey, because through that, I found other organizations. So one that I found was V2I, Vets to Industry. So if anyone's not been there, because of the virtualization during COVID, a lot of these things went from in-person to virtual, and I had these virtual networking events, which I found were incredibly helpful, because in them you had a what I consider a quasi-vetted network of people that you knew were good people, as opposed to like just some stranger throwing you an invitation on LinkedIn. You knew
Right.
most of the people there were either veterans, or they were recruiters that want veterans, or they were advocates for veterans. So you'd meet upwards of 100 people a time, and you go into breakout rooms and you do your elevator pitch. And that was one of the best parts about it. It really helped me refine my elevator pitch, getting comfortable talking on camera to a bunch of strangers. It's just, which is why this is not odd to me anymore.
Right.
Back then it was a little strange. None of us had done it. So that then made me aware of some of those other programs that were out there. I mean, Vets to Industry started as a resource of pulling all that information together, and I found out about Onward Opportunity, that program, which is originally all I was going to do, honestly, was work on my PMP during my transition period, because you're allotted a certain amount of time. Your last 180 days, you can do one of these skill bridge programs, and I was like, I'll just do that. But that in and of itself, like, does not necessarily feed you into a job. It gets you a certification for a job, but doesn't feed you into one. And I honestly didn't think that was something that I had to worry about, because I thought that we were going to go to Huntsville, Alabama, which is where all of our aviation maintenance in the Army is tested, acquired, had a huge network there. I already had people that when they knew I was coming out were like, hey, my boss wants to talk to you. So I felt very comfortable going there. But then I had always told my wife, I've drug you around the world. When it's time to get out, it's your turn. You can tell me wherever you want to go. Like, I'm going to let you have this one. This is your move, your permanent change of station, and it's our forever home. So it matters. And she switched up on me, and she said, I don't really want to go to Huntsville. I think I'd rather go to Florida. It would be closer to our, both kind of the middle ground, equidistant, as you said earlier, of our two families. So now I'm looking at your pyramid. They tell you when you're getting out, you can have, definitely you can have one of three things on your transition. So you can have the place you want to live, you can have the pay you want to have, or you can have the job you want to have. So now I just lost the place, so now I'm going to Huntsville. I just lost like what I knew was a pretty guaranteed paycheck, which was above my red line pay, which is something you all have to think about as well as, okay, what do you need to make the same that you're making in the military? And remember,
Right.
you're going to be taxed more. Yeah. So, there's that as well. And then the job, because I was a subject matter expert in aviation maintenance. So now I'm like, Florida, there's not a lot of that. There's maybe, there are some positions, but not tons. So it's much more competitive. So then I was like, I need to get into something. I found Hiring Our Heroes. Luckily, I made it. Hiring Our Heroes is just one of many DoD skill bridges that are out there. There are others that are just as good, just as valuable. So I don't want anybody to think that you have to do Hiring Our Heroes to do a skill bridge. But for me, it was the right fit. It's a corporate fellowship program. So it introduces you to Chamber of Commerce affiliated corporations. And from that, and from having built my LinkedIn, the next step for me was what we call informational interviews. So an informational interview is not getting interviewed by a company for a job. It's you actually requesting people that you met on LinkedIn or through some other means if they can have a conversation with you. It's just a conversation, whether it be on video, which I would recommend if you can do it, or on a telephone. But you'd be surprised, and you use the power of LinkedIn to determine if you have a shared history. Where you're both in a service, and you reach out to these people and say, "Hey, listen, I'd just like to talk to you about your experience with Verizon or your experience with Amazon or whatever companies you might be interested in." So I had tons of these, especially once I knew what the companies were that Hiring Our Heroes was going to have potentially us connected to. I talked to people from those different companies, and it helped me narrow down like which companies would I want to work for. What are the different things I need to know about those companies? You never in those interviews are you asking for a job, like that's not the purpose of them. So if you have them, it was just really learning and being curious about the places. And from that, like, I found Verizon, and we started this interview process with Hiring Heroes. So the way it works is you apply, if you get accepted, you post your resume, and then the companies, if they're interested in you, request an interview with you. And one of my mentors recommended take every interview you can get, even if you don't want that job. Just take the interview because it's interview practice. So I did. I took every interview. I got 9 interviews, which some people, I was surprised. There was no 6 in my cohort. He got 2. And you look at his resume and you look at mine, and his resume was like, wow, like you're amazing. But I honestly feel like it was too overwhelming. I think.
Right. Well, Scott, let me break right here and tell you, he or she may have thought I got this, because I'm a colonel. it's going to be, and so maybe, he didn't have the same, mindset that you did going into this, so
Oh,
I
he
mean,
did.
we're all different.
We
Yeah.
became very good friends. He was just as nervous during transition as I was, So I think all of us, regardless of who you are, it's a nervous time. It's hard to leave,
Yeah. No, you're so
after you've
right.
been
Yeah.
a successful career. Like I told him, we kind of talked about it afterwards, like why trying to analyze why would I get more requests? And I really think it's the less is more. You need every one of these little nuggets about you. This should be kind of like a breadcrumb leading to the person wanting to have a conversation with you, I say. So you put a little bit out there on your resume, bullet points, you make it readable, you make it look nice, you put a little more on your LinkedIn, but you want them to know more, the interviewers, and then
All
you
right.
get to the conversation. And that's where, if you've prepared well for an interview, that's where you hopefully will knock those people's socks off, right? And they're going to say, you know what, I want this person on my team. I could see sitting next to them on an airplane for 12 hours, as we go somewhere and not being bored to death.
Right. That's actually a great way to think about that. That's pretty cool. I like that. And real quick, before we, progress here, a couple things that you said that I want to highlight here.
Sure.
We all have a plan, right? And in the military, we know that your plan is only good until the enemy, has a vote, and they do. So that first contact with the enemy, so to speak, will alter your plan. So, as you said, you kind of knew where you were going with your prior or with your, future career. And it made sense, right? Absolutely made sense that you would do that and go to Alabama. So yeah, things change and you have to be flexible and have alternate plans, right? And hopefully most folks in the military get that part. You talked about the Skill Bridge program. Folks that are transitioning, if you're leaving, you probably have an idea what Skill Bridge is. Depending on what service you're in, whether the leadership understands what Skill Bridge is about, and if they're smart on the opportunities, and then figuring out a way to let folks go to those opportunities. DoD sponsors the Skill Bridge program, so it's a DoD program, and not everyone gets to go. There's a lot of timing involved. It matters. Where are you stationed? What's your job? And so there's a lot that goes into this, and it's difficult sometimes to get that opportunity because you can be gone for up to 6 months. Now, granted, it's at the end of your time, but so there's a lot to that. But how many folks on the outside, that hire know about the Skill Bridge program? So, it's incumbent upon companies that, are veteran friendly, that want to go the next step and actually, figure out how to bring veterans in. It's a great way to do it. It doesn't cost them anything other than a little bit of time up front to get into the program and get approved. And then you can have these smart guys and gals come in. They're still getting paid as a Marine or a sailor or as a soldier, airman, and they're getting paid and they're there doing whatever it is the Skill Bridge program is doing for that company. So it's a win-win-win, right? So Skill Bridge is a fantastic opportunity. So I would hope that companies start to inquire about that and figure out how they can be part of it. And then the last thing you talked about was these interviews that aren't interviews for the job, right? But you're inquiring about the company. You're finding out about the culture. You're finding out about the opportunities that are there, so that you can come away with, hey, that's really a great place. Or maybe during that time, some things came up and that wound up being, it looks like a good company, but I don't think that would be for me for whatever reason. And it's so, these information interviews are so important because, like you said, it gives you experience, right? And you need it because how many times did you interview for a job, over the past 25 years, like you would do outside of the military? You don't. So it gives you that opportunity to, up your game interview wise. And so there's just so much goodness to what you said. And I don't think there's a whole lot of folks that are doing that. And so I think that's a huge pearl of wisdom, is to do those types of interviews and to remember that that's the type of interview it is. Don't confuse the
Yeah.
two, right? So anyhow, I just wanted to talk to those real quick. So I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Yeah, no, you're good. So yeah, the interview process with hiring our heroes led to me discovering Verizon. They were not on my radar before hiring our heroes, and I didn't know that they were such a military-friendly company. Number 3 this year, but they've been number 1 many years in a row consecutively, not just for how they treat the military service members, but also for spouses. Amazing corporation, lots of social responsibility, very diverse, a wonderful vision and culture that I could totally get behind. So, and on that one, I was nervous for that interview when I got it, but I interviewed for a position as a senior engineer as part of a data analytics team. And I had not been a traditional data analyst, although I had been an analyst before, but I was able to, you're able to take your military experience and plug it into many of these jobs. So whereas you might not use those same platforms, we were doing analysis all the time on our aircraft as a logistician on what's breaking, what type of parts do we typically need, and leveraging that to make a plan for, okay, what are you going to bring with you when you go other places? So I was able to bring that to the table. And in the end, I got that position, that fellowship. It was 100% remote, and the job was going to be 100% remote if I got offered a job, which was perfect because that solved that problem of how do I get to Florida and have a job? Because so I was in Washington, and then once I finished and I got offered that job, I was able to travel cross country and do that same job there. But in that uncertain time, when I wasn't sure if I would get that job, I delved into other programs. So I was doing the 020 Onward Opportunity PMP class, which was at almost about an hour a night for all that period. I did 4-block, which is another. 4-block is very much like LtCap or the Transition Assistance Program, but it's over a longer period of time, and it also introduces you to different corporations who come in each week and speak to you. So it's a great other method to network. It's also free. All of these things are free to us as veterans, but I bit off a lot. Like, it was a very, very busy time, and I would not recommend that. I think that's where if you have more time, you can spread it out a little bit, because I definitely pushed myself to the stress limit during that transition time period. But then once I got the job, things calmed down a little bit and got a little bit better. And now I'm in a really great job. It's data analysis is a part of my job, but so is managing a project management software platform called Jira. And ironically, we have a drone program. So I got to put that drone license that I got with the FAA to use on our drone program. So I'm one of their drone pilots. It's just, so everything come together. I leverage that experience to help the team improve their drone program for audits. And it's wonderful because I get to keep my finger on that aviation pulse, even though I'm now working for a telecommunications company.
Right. Wow, that's cool. I love how all that comes together too. And again, it's not, from being, mindless and doing it through osmosis, is through being engaged and, figuring out how to put things into motion, how to kind of, manage the orchestra, as it comes. Sometimes there's timing and a little bit of luck involved, who what it sounds like you had a masterful looking back on it, right? When you're going through it, it doesn't necessarily feel, like you have it together maybe as much as you do. And in fact, some of the things you talked about remind me of Michael Klemmer. You may be connected with him on LinkedIn. Yes. He cast a very broad net in his transition. And man, I always learn so much when I talk to folks like you that come in on these interviews and tell their story. There's a wealth of information. Sometimes you're hearing things for the first time and it strikes you as, oh my gosh, that's incredible. Why didn't I think about that? Or why didn't I do that? Sometimes some of this stuff, again, when I transitioned, a lot of this wasn't out there, but it's incredible. And, it's like another guy that is a LinkedIn guy, Herb Thompson, he says, own your journey. And I think you alluded to that as well. That is so important because there aren't many folks that are standing out there ready to hand you a job just because you served, right? There are a lot of folks that value your service, as Americans, or, they understand the sacrifice to varying degrees. but yeah, being able to take charge of that time of your life, understand it for what it is. Don't make a lot of assumptions that you can't verify, right? Because assumptions can lead you down a wrong path and waste time. So yeah, your transition is a great story. And when you are thinking about transition and that whole time period, is there any one thing that you felt that you did extremely well?
Yeah. I would say I networked well. I think that was, and still, I still network. I'm not actively searching for a job because I love the culture at Verizon, but I
Sure.
still actively network now, more so to help other people just like this through their own transition journey. But I did discover like this is a skill set that I have. I'm a good networker. I can reach them, and that plugs into so many opportunities. I had other job offers as a result during this process, during the fellowship. That had nothing to do with the fellowship, just people that through networking, wanted to have a conversation and said, hey, you're interested in this job. But most of those was because it was someone I helped. And then in turn, they want to help you. So one of the greatest lessons to me is do as much as you can to help other people, because that's really, truly, what helps you succeed in life. And it gives you a lot of satisfaction in the end. So networking and helping others has been probably, the silver bullet for me. But I also learned some things I could have done better, in
Right.
hindsight. So
that was my next question.
yeah, I mean, it's, one of the things I completely failed on is, so your VA claims process is incredibly important. Don't not take care of that.
Yeah,
at the
this is
expense of some of these other things.
this is a floor stomper, right?
Yes.
If you've been in an academic setting, when something's important, they'll stomp their foot twice and tell you this is important. So
Yeah.
if you guys are transitioning, this is important. So
Yeah, you
ahead.
can file, so you can file your BDD claim. It's called 180 days out from when you exit the military. So in that same time frame, I'm trying to file this VA claim.
And by the way, I hate to interrupt again, but
Yes.
180 days for all the Marines out there, that's 6 months. Okay. I couldn't resist.
You got the Army guys laughing on that one.
Oh yeah, well, hey, that's right.
Yes, and it's 6 months from your actual last day in the military, not from when you start your terminal. We call it terminal leave, but not from when you start that final transition leave or terminal leave, whatever you may call it. So you have to keep that in mind as well. But with that VA claim, you're also, hopefully you've documented some of the medical things that you've experienced in your career, right? Which I had not. As a pilot, one of the things that we really, this isn't the right answer and it's not the right thing to do, so don't feel like I'm advocating this, but many of us aviators do not talk about the things that are wrong with us because we are definitely afraid of being grounded, what you referred to earlier. So whether we have headaches, whether we have any type of anxiety, we oftentimes don't present those to the doctors because we just don't know what's going to get us grounded and out of the cockpit, which is where we're passionate about being, especially as a warrant officer.
Right.
So I was kind of like on overdrive trying to document some things at the same time that had been bothering me once I had my last flight. But what I failed to do was talk to life insurance companies before that. And I painted myself into a corner where I couldn't get a low-cost life insurance policy anymore. So that was one of my number one lessons to learn. If you're going to not do the SGLI insurance, which you can get, and then it turns into VSGLI, and you're going to
which
go
becomes very expensive in the out years.
Yes,
extremely.
incredibly expensive.
That curve goes like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I didn't understand that for a long time either. When I looked at the cost,
a lot
I thought
don't,
the cost was okay. If I start this at 55, this is the cost I'm locked in on. It's not that. The cost goes up as you get older. It's to the point where you're paying hundreds of dollars for that $400,000 worth of coverage. It's really not, in my opinion, it's not a very, and it doesn't compare to some of the other options out there.
Right. No, it doesn't. Scott, I saw a graph the other day. It was on LinkedIn. I don't recall who posted it, but it's eye-opening. When you see the graph, it's like, why would you do that? I mean, there's reasons, right? And if you don't know, you don't know, and you feel like you're making a good decision, and depends on who you are and where you are in life. But essentially the bottom line with that graph was saying over time, you pay $200,000 for $400,000 in insurance.
Yeah.
So if you put it that way, that's like a head scratcher. Why would you do that? All right.
Exactly.
But yeah,
Exactly.
great point. Yeah.
So I hadn't gone to that. So I would say one of the things, get your insurance squared away before you necessarily start documenting these things that you're going to do on your VA claim, because you're going to have to be honest. You're going to have to be transparent. I failed there, and I also bit off a lot more than I could chew. I failed to take time to breathe in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And also very important. You're going through a lot of emotions. I know you got some first responders on here as well, but anytime you transition from a professional career that you've done for a long time and you're very good at that into something else, it comes with stresses for you, for my family too, for my wife and children. They very much liked, living on base. They liked the camaraderie that we all had together. You've got these families that play together all the time, and you might leave them and then see them again, and it's just pick up where you left off. So they were really having a hard time with it as well, and still are. I'd say we're still in our transition year. So it's
yes,
the journey. We're not settled yet. Our house is, we just got our furniture because of so many delays. So it's
yeah, Scott, that's an incredibly good point on the transition piece, right? If you have a family, it's not just you as the military guy or gal that's transitioning, it's the family, and they're going through so many changes too. And there's a loss of identity that comes with that, and that's kind of what you were talking to a bit there. And sometimes there's maybe a loss in purpose, right? Because you were so purposeful. You know who you are. You know what you're going to do for the most part. Any day you go in, you have this zest for life because you love and you're passionate about your profession, and that all ends in one day. And if you don't have that time, not to, I know I've brought up a couple of names, but Rob Renz, a guy I'm connected with, he was in the Marine Corps. He's an advocate of taking some time for you, whether you have family or not. You got to take a little bit of time for you in that transition between leaving the military and when you step on board in that new position, whatever that might be. Take some time, even if it's just a week. He went, I think, to Colorado and went, backpacking, mountain climbing in the Rockies. And boy, that just opened up, his heart, and was able to take that breath you talked about. And he kind of saw, okay, I do love the Marine Corps, but look at this beautiful place. There is something more to come, so he was able to take that little bit of time and find himself. And I think that's a great point, Scott, and I think oftentimes folks just don't do that. They get right into the meat grinder, and that can cause stress too, because again, your family's transitioning with you, and there's some things that you can miss with them. And so, being mindful of that, I think that's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up.
So that the transition, the great part about, I had to take time to move. So that was already in my negotiation process. Once the fellowship hits towards the end, at least the Hiring Heroes one, the companies, if they're going to make you an offer, it happens about the 6 to 7 week mark. Some companies are created better than others in that. So in those informational interviews, that's a good question, is on that company, is there a job requisition slotted against this fellowship? And that's the difference between a fellowship as well. So sure. Verizon does. In this case, Verizon does have a job requisition against every one of their fellowship positions. So it places them, in my opinion, higher in the pecking order of some of these companies you could potentially work with. Incredibly important. So the fellowship is almost, an extended interview process. If you think about it, you interviewed, you got the fellowship, now you're working every day and you're proving yourself. So I got that. I had to finish my clearing with the military. You need to leave yourself time for that. And then I picked up a period when I was on terminal where I was able to work for Verizon and work for the military, which was great. But I built into that, like, hey, I need to move cross country, and I didn't have enough vacation time banked. So they allowed me a leave of absence to move cross country to Florida, to a house that, house hunting now, if you're getting out and you're going somewhere else, is incredibly challenging. That's another thing to factor into your planning process, is it's not easy to find a home. We ended up going for new construction because of that. And then the new construction, because of logistical delays, was bumped back 4 separate times. So we did take but that was the great break. That time period of like moving, I got an RV and we drove cross country for 4 weeks and got to kind of de-link from the military, de-link from that job. They were willing to hold my spot for me, which was wonderful of them. And I really got a chance, just like Rob, to kind of collect myself, because for much too long, I was just going too fast and too hard. And that was one of my promises to myself. You know, going through a lot of these different transition programs, they talk about finding your why, finding your passion. What do you want to promise yourself when you get out? And my promise to myself was, I will have a less stressful job, because being a pilot is incredibly stressful. Being a maintenance manager is incredibly stressful. Yep. And, you know, I just didn't want to be at that level of stress anymore, because I didn't want to bring that home, you know. And I think I did a pretty good job of not bringing it home throughout my career, but, you know, you bring some home, even if you don't talk about how stressed out you are. So it's great to have found that place for myself.
Yeah, that's the time that you just talked about, you know, for folks that haven't had an RV or haven't experienced that, you know, you don't just get an RV, right? There's a lot to learn. There's a lot that you do to, you know, make sure the RV is safe, and, you know, the things that you do daily, and, you know, the daily maintenance with an RV, and, you know, learning how to drive, you know, whether it's a fifth wheel or, you know, a class C, whatever, you know, whatever you've got. But man, it's so fun, and it is nice to see, and being the world traveler that you are. I don't know how much you travel within the States, but, you know, going from Washington to Florida, there's a lot of ground to cover. And I'm sure you saw a lot of really neat things that you wouldn't have had the opportunity to do otherwise. And the way all this worked out for you, you know, it's, you know, not to get religious, but I guess I am, you know, God has a plan. And it's amazing how it comes together. You know, sometimes you are knocking your head against the wall thinking, what the heck's going on? And then there are times when it's all laid out there for you, and you see it. You know, sometimes you see it as you're going through it. Others, you don't see it until you've maybe gone through it. But, you know, you're absolutely blessed, you know, and yeah, that's, I would imagine your kids are loving where you are now. Again, you talked about, you know, there's a difference because they're having to move, but I've seen you share with me the picture of where you are. There's that beautiful, I guess that was a lake where Lagoon. You guys were for some lagoon. Yeah. Yeah. And the vibe there is just so cool. So yeah, Florida's a neat place. I've been there a number of times. You know, I've got family that lives down there now. So I'll be looking to head that way, you know, probably not too much in the summertime, but absolutely, you know, in the cooler months. I'm spoiled in California. There's not much humidity out here. So
yeah, you definitely have to visit. And Jacksonville, get a lot of people. Bruce Thompson, he's right around the corner. So a lot of the other people you've met. So we got to get a little group up there in that Jacksonville corner. You know, it's funny, you talk about learning how to manage an RV. So that was one of my plans too. Like, I was going to get the RV with enough time to take it on some like test runs and go on a couple trips. But again, that got delayed too. So my RV, so I literally learned how to be an RVer going cross country like that, because my timeline, I had a fixed timeline for when my leave of absence ended. So I knew exactly how much time I had. And I was like, we're not going to have time to practice. Like, we're just going to learn.
There's no stress in that either, right?
No, well, you know, everything I learned on YouTube. So it's
yeah. Hey, I tell you what, yeah, absolutely, man. That is you know, being able to go on there and, you know, hit that search engine and find those things, isn't that incredible?
Yes,
you know,
it is.
that it can save you money. It can save you some costly mistakes. Absolutely. It's great to be able to leverage that. But yeah, I owned an RV back in the, I guess early 2000s, and we had it for about 7-8 years, you know, loved it, and then wound up selling it because we PCS back to the East Coast, and then, you know, wound up getting another one about 1.5 years ago. And then, you know, COVID hits, and, you know, so, but yeah, there's so much to consider, you know, beyond the expenditure of funds for getting whatever you get, you know, because there's maintenance over the years too that you have to be cognizant of, and you should set aside a budget for, you know, how much you think. And obviously, you know this because that's what you did and on the maintenance side there. So yeah. Well, All right, Scott. Well, let's do this. We are right at an hour, so
Okay.
to be a good steward of your time, do you have how much more time do you have?
I would have to check my calendar.
Yeah. Well, no, absolutely.
I am very organized, but you know, but I haven't looked at my calendar to see when my next meeting is. I did slot a decompression time from here.
Yes.
No, I'm good. I've got at least 20 more minutes if you want it.
Okay.
But we don't
Yeah.
have
Well,
to do that
great.
long.
Yeah. Okay. So no, that's good. I'm glad we have that time here. So now at Verizon, I know you mentioned it, but so what's kind of the key function again of what you're doing now as a senior systems engineer?
Yeah, I'm a data analyst. Senior engineer is the job title, senior engineer consult. So in that, it's a lot of it has to do with data visualization. So taking the raw data and then visualizing that. We use a platform called Tableau to do that quite often. It's an incredibly intuitive software platform with a lot of capabilities. So taking the data and seeing how can we improve our processes to create more value for our customers, and also analyzing a lot of the quality of what's Verizon putting out there for us, for everyone. But I also manage our project management software platform, which is called Jira, and I'm part of their drone team. So I can't talk too much about what we do with the drones, but you can use your imagination to use drones to improve our customer service as well.
Right. Yeah, that's cutting edge, and I'm sure Albert Bellamy is probably a little bit jealous. Yeah,
because he doesn't get to fly drones. That could be. He might be jealous of that one. Yeah.
Absolutely.
He could come over though. We'll help him get in. Recently, I was brought on. We have an organization. It's called Valor. It's an employee readiness group. So if some people aren't aware of these when they're looking into different companies, but Valor is our veterans employee readiness group. So it advocates for veterans. It communicates the value of veterans to the leadership, and there are executives that are affiliated with all of Verizon's employee readiness groups. But I'm the Valor Southeast communications lead. So we have our overall Valor organization, and then the states are broken up into different areas, and I'm with the Valor Southeast cohort. So there's a block of states where we do different initiatives, volunteer programs for veterans to assist, whether it be mentoring for interview press, mock interview, or a cup of coffee to talk about things just like this, the transition process. What's it like to interview at a place like Verizon? What can you do here? Because a lot of people just don't realize, and in a huge company like Verizon, there's tons of different jobs. So people just think, oh, I don't know anything about phones or, setting up, this fiber in the ground. They don't know it, but there's everything imaginable inside of Verizon that they can do. And that's why I say a lot of times, hey, when you first get in, you might not get the job that you want, but you do that for a year. Now you're inside. Most of the hires come from inside of the company. So get a job if you can get it. Get your foot in the door if it's for one of those big corporations. And then after you've done that job and done it well, because you're military, you've learned how to upskill yourself your whole career. You've learned how to figure things out your whole career. You'll do well. And then you go to the job that you really want to do when you know more about it, because there's lots of from the globe. And I mean, Amazon's the same way. Many people, our part about Amazon's getting in the door, but once you're in the door, there's all kinds of directions you can go within Amazon. So it's insightful. And then you having not been in the corporate world for a long time, since I just got out of college. I was in corporate then for a little while, but low level. But being in this tier, it's really opened my eyes to that.
Right. Well, that's incredible. What you just laid out there, and it's so true. And you touched on, the volunteering. You mentioned, volunteer efforts and helping veterans. So I want to kind of shift gears into that for just a little bit, because again, we're getting towards the end of the interview here. Volunteering. I know that you are someone who is into volunteering. Can you talk about some of the volunteer efforts you're part of and the things that you're doing, that you have done and are currently doing?
Yeah. So one that's very close to my heart is the Dust Off Association. So I'm on the executive council for the Dust Off Association, and I manage part of their social media campaigns. I manage the LinkedIn part of their social media campaign. So getting information out to people that are part of the Dust Off Association or maybe don't know about it, so that they're tracking it. It's a great group of people founded by mostly Vietnam veterans. But now, just like many of these veteran service organizations that a lot of those people are starting to pass, unfortunately. So we need to get
Right.
fresh blood into it. We need to reinvigorate it and make sure we continue to do the great things of just connecting people when you're out of the service. I think it's incredibly important to try to maintain those relationships. But this is also a way, right? LinkedIn and talking to
Mhm.
people and these type of networking events, I think is in some ways therapeutic. So I do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do. Valor is the other one that I'm dedicated to. And for a while I was doing 4Block as not as one of their main coaches, but as a coach that would step into when they do their sessions. They'll have the main instructors for the 4Block cohorts, and then they bring people on as coaches. So you'll get assigned, 3 to 5 people who you'll kind of mentor under your wings to help them when they're developing their resumes, when they're developing their elevator pitches. And at first you have to go through a 4Block cohort before you can do that. But then you take what you've learned and you help guide the next group that goes through.
Right. Yeah, that's I love volunteering. For the elements that you laid out there, being able to help, and you talked about this earlier. The satisfaction that you get in helping somebody else. It comes full circle. Because you
Yes.
can see that smile on their face, or you can see that it helped them get to that next level, whatever that is. And it's just rewarding all the way around, and it makes you kind of understand better why we're here. And I think we're all in this together, and we have to be willing to help folks. So yeah, volunteering is something I think significant, and I think it also says a lot about the folks who do that too. So well, Scott, go ahead. You want to say something?
I was going to say, you asked me before if I have a side hustle, and like I told you, for me, I'm in a good place. Like I don't need to do a side hustle, but volunteering is kind of my side hustle. So if I have that extra time that I can dedicate to helping someone, it's so much more rewarding than making a few extra $100, in a week. Just because in the end, it's connections that matter, and the people you can make an impact in their lives.
You're exactly right, and something that you talked to, and I didn't want to interrupt because you were on a roll. So, but talking about one of the things that in your transition, when you talked about networking, I mean that is so huge because the underlying principle to that is building relationships, right? That's how we get things done in life. Is building and fostering, maintaining those relationships, because it absolutely matters. And that was a great point, and thanks for sharing that. So at this point here, we're at the end of the interview, and we'll see. I'll ask Sarah Carell if she can come in at this point, and she may have a couple of things she wants to say, and then I'll ask that she lead us into the Q&A section if there are folks that are on board that have a question or comment. So Sarah, are you with us?
I am. Yes. Thank you. Scott, that was really interesting. And I think my comment, you know what I think is amazing is you just seem like you take hold of life and you go for it. So I was very inspired by that. Like it made me think, oh gosh, I bet there's so many other things that I can learn. And so that was very inspiring to me, just how you just take hold of it and run. And I actually have a ton of questions, so I'm only going to just keep it to one because so I'm even thinking too, for people that go into the military and they're not sure when they're going to transition. I think what I heard you say about how important the networking and LinkedIn is, would you just say that that's just the first place to just start building relationships on LinkedIn wherever you're at? Just get that LinkedIn going and start there. And then when you know more, you'll do more.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But you've got to, with that, there is a level of education I think that needs to happen with LinkedIn. People need to understand that LinkedIn is a professional platform. It's not like TikTok. It's not like Facebook. It's not a place to talk about religion and politics. It is a place to talk about becoming a better professional and a better educator. So yeah, the earlier you can get involved in that and start to understand that process and build your network, the better. And your core network is probably going to be your oldest friends, really, and then everyone you work with along the way. So yeah, I wish the military would talk about LinkedIn a lot earlier. In our years, I think it's kind of an unknown, and having not worked in the civilian sector for so many years, I don't know how many civilians even use it, unless they're actively searching for another job. I would say before I came onto my team, many of the people on my team were not using it. And then when we did this class, we're like, listen, this doesn't mean that you're looking for another job. This just means that you are prepared. You never know what's going to happen in your life. You never know if you're going to get laid off, and now you've got to find something else. So why would you not develop that, what is essentially a beefed up resume with a automatic network of people that you can reach out to? Like, I firmly feel that if I needed a job, I could blast on LinkedIn a message and say, hey, listen, I just got laid off. Does anybody have any leads on a job in the Jacksonville area that I could check out? And I think somebody would come up and be like, yeah, I heard about a position here if you might want to try to get an interview. So it's valuable, aside from the fact that you can search for jobs on LinkedIn.
That's great input. Yeah, that's great. So the person really understanding what it's meant for, using it in that way to build it, it's always the best time to do that.
Yes,
that's what I'm hearing.
absolutely.
Oh, that's great. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, it looks like Chris put his paw up there.
Oh, there. Yeah, just blended right in there.
God, thank you so much for your service, and thank you for your time and your wisdom and sharing. The first thing I observe about you is the absolute positive glow that I see off you. It's almost like looking at a brand new couple and how happy you are. And I very much attribute that to that positive mindset that you spoke about. So thank you for being sharing of that. I think you kind of covered it a little bit. Speaking about how much luck and does luck and timing play into it? And are you able to bridge that gap with LinkedIn, which I think you just kind of said? And I think mindset too, we think about transitioning out of the military, but I think that in our military careers, or as a guy that I'm a Seattle cop, so you just left my state. Congratulations on your departure. Awesome. We're always transitioning, whether it's from battalion commander to battalion commander, PCS to PCS, we're always in that transition. But there's some sort of definitive thing between leaving service for some reason. But in having that mindset of always having a plan B, if we're not having a plan B and some transitioning in some sort of way, we're kind of stagnant. And I love what you're talking about, that you have this confidence because you've got some sort of plan, or at least a mindset that should Verizon in tomorrow, that you could put that feeler out there and have a job pretty darn quick. Thank you so much for that, man. I really appreciate that. Yeah,
to add to that, like it's the mindset, but it's also knowing your value, right, Chris? Because I think so many people in the military that just do not recognize how incredibly valuable their skills are. And a big part of that is the leadership skills that we innately develop because we're continually given increasing levels of responsibility, right? As you continue that career, and that cannot be taught in a 4-hour class. A lot of companies send their people through leadership classes, and that does not create a leader. A leader grows from their failures and their successes, right? Probably more from your failures. As you've been in the military, you grew, and then you're like, I'm never going to do it that way again. So it's, everyone sees that. Every veteran is incredibly valuable. It really disturbs me when I see, like, I'm in New Jersey right now because I'm visiting family, but here in Jersey, somebody pumps your gas. But it's horrible when I see a veteran pump a gas, and I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Oh, I was in the infantry for 20 years and I really couldn't find anything else. I'm like, really? You're a leader. You are a leader. Like, there's much better opportunities for you out there.
And as if there's one thing that we could do better as a military organization is educating people how to translate your current job into the civilian world, because you're right. So many of these things are transferable. And same thing as we have so many people leaving police departments. We don't think that there's any value outside of that, about the skills that we've developed while doing that stuff. So thank you for pointing that out, Scott. I appreciate your time, sir.
Oh yeah. Police officers, incredibly valuable. Like, I think about, like, all the situations a police officer manages, how much record keeping you're having to do with that, how many laws you have to be familiar with, in the execution of your job. It's a huge burden, and I can understand why police officers might want to transition into another job at some point, because it's a lot of stress too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Oh, Chris, what is your, so you're a police officer, but I'm assuming then you're guard or reserve?
Reserves. Yes, sir.
Reserve. What do you do in a reserve?
I'm in a drill sergeant unit. I'm the operations NCO for the drill sergeant company up here in Renton, Washington. Well, I'm sorry, we just moved it back to JBLM.
Oh, cool. Excellent. Yeah. That's great. I like it.
Thank you for your lifetime of service, sir.
You're welcome, Chris.
Yeah, Scott, Chris, he's a regular here on the show. He attends when he can, but he's also someone who contributes under the Power of Our Story platform that Sarah Carell has created here. So, but Chris, you nailed it with. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Power of Our Story. Chris nailed it when he said, the first thing you see in Scott is this glow and this positivity. It's so contagious. That's that's kind of the first thing you see. I agree.
Yeah, it helps that that's probably an innate part of me. But I often tell that's one of my tips on interviews, because a lot of people are like, how do you go into an interview? Like, how do you do it better? And people, you go through the whole STAR format if you're not familiar with STAR, but it's like, what was the situation? What was, the task? What were your actions? What were the results? You go through this, and I wrote them out for like every single scenario of a question they're going to ask me and what my accomplishments. At the end of the day, what really matters is how do you make the people feel on the other side of that camera, because a lot of them are video right now, or the other side of that desk that the interview's at, and you got to smile. Just a smile is for military, probably for police officers too. Smiling can sometimes be hard because in our jobs, we don't associate that necessarily with professionalism. When you're a soldier, you've got to be serious and strong. So it's something you need to train yourself to do again because in a civilian world, they do smile. Like, they want to be nice to people. So I always said, first thing, most important thing in an interview, go in there smiling with a positive attitude, because many interviewers make the decision within the first like 3 to 5 minutes, whether they want to hire you. And the rest of the stuff is just fluff. It's filler time of the other questions they're asking you.
Well, and, to that, Scott, as you're talking about LinkedIn, your professional photo, you need to be smiling too, right? It's kind of the same concept, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I don't even want to start on a LinkedIn class because there's so many nuggets of things there. Yes.
Yeah, we'll bring you back for another interview where we can, help folks with that too. But,
yeah.
Okay. Well, hey, Sarah, anyone else or
real quick,
if you have any more? Oh, there we go.
Yes, Daniel.
Yeah, I just think that's great advice there. I transitioned twice, so I got out after 15 years of active duty as a young staff sergeant. And I did not realize that you needed to smile. So, because this is my happy face. So,
that's great.
That's excellent advice.
We'll work on that. We can work on
that. So then I joined I got back in after a 7-year break in service, and then I finally retired. And when I retired, I learned a lot better. And the services, like Scott said, were a little bit more robust when I retired. So yeah, taking those Hire for Heroes and Onward to Opportunity classes, and actually showing a little personality instead of going in there as the airborne ranger that I thought could do any job. So that's great, and yeah, showing your personality, even if it is, a little harsh sometimes.
So what are you doing now? Have you finished your transition, or are you still?
Oh yeah, I retired in 2013.
Okay.
And I came back home, and now I work for the Arizona Department of Corrections.
Okay. Yeah. That's hard work too, though, right?
Well, it is, but I work in the central office, but I was out in the prison yesterday, and I'll be in a prison tomorrow, working with volunteers and the senior chaplains.
Great. Good.
Thank you, sir, for sharing.
Anybody else? I think that's it, Scott.
Okay.
Scott Duncan.
Yeah, I was going to say we actually did pretty good not confusing the Scots here. So
yeah,
I didn't confuse myself, so I feel like it was a successful interview here. So. Well, hey, this has been fantastic, Scott. It absolutely has. That's the one thing about this podcast is the people that come on to interview. Everyone's got a wealth of talent. They have a wealth of information to share. And it goes beyond, the military transition piece, right? Because we're all guys and gals, and, we have so much experience to bring, and we learn, through these exchanges. And this has been an incredible interview. I think this is absolutely something that people are going to really get something from. And again, they're all good, but I would say this was an exceptional interview. And I thank you so much for your time. I know, as I mentioned, we tried to get this to happen a couple times, and it almost didn't happen again this time. But you decided that, hey, let's make it happen.
Yes.
Life is going to continue to happen. No matter where we are and what we do, so let's do it. And I am very thankful that you did. This has been a great time. I've learned here too, which I usually do, so that's a good thing. Again, much appreciated.
Thanks, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to meet you all and speak with you all today. It's really great. You made me richer, and I really hope reach out. I'm on LinkedIn, so if you haven't found me on LinkedIn, it's the last is Scott-Forbes. So when you're looking for the URL, reach out, connect, say where we met. That's the other. I will give one LinkedIn tip. If you ever put a connection request, send a personalized note with it.
Absolutely.
Although if you're military, I always say yes. Like I don't bet as bad if I see military, I let it go. But if you don't know the person and they're not military, personalize it.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I do the same exact thing. And the other thing is you'll see that smile too, so you'll know it's the right Scott Forbes. So, but
Thanks.
Okay, well, hey, one last thing, Scott, I don't want to forget to mention is, you did mention a number of organizations that you touched on through experience in your transition. If you don't mind, before I post this on LinkedIn with a short segment so we can advertise for folks to go to YouTube for the full interview, if there are any links, if there are any information that you want to provide me with, that we can put into the description part of the YouTube posting, please do that. You can send it to me either email or DM on LinkedIn. Either is fine. So anything that you want to incorporate, we'll make sure that it gets in there too. So,
yes, absolutely. I definitely will.
Okay. Well, great. Well, again, hey, folks that tuned in today live, thank you so much for your interest in the program, but certainly for Scott being here today. Thanks for the questions and comments. Those are always very constructive and add value to what we're doing here. So everyone have a great day. Scott, thanks again. Safe travels back to Florida, and we'll talk soon.